Tickets are now on sale for Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the beautiful Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. Make sure you take advantage of the early bird specials before Black Friday. This will be a 4-day event with 12 speakers covering topics such as ET contact, experiencer testimonies, lost history, secret space programs, time travel, Illuminati, parallel realities, and so much more. Visit journeytotruth.online for more details. Make sure to grab your ticket today before the early bird special ends on Black Friday. We hope to see you there.
All right. How you guys doing? Thank you all for being here. You're all amazing. I've been feeling the love, so love you all. Thank you. So this next presenter, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's this guy named Tyler. I don't know. I think he does a show with some other guy. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Let's see if he's any good or not. No, Tyler has been. I mean, we've been, doing this show for over 5 years now, and we wouldn't be doing this without you guys and without us synchronistically meeting at a conference, and now we're doing our own conferences. So, yeah, I never imagined we'd be doing any of this or any of the stuff we're doing now. So, yeah, I didn't write this, by the way. So. I was handed a note by a dear friend to read for Tyler, and you might find out who it is by the end of it. So here, I'm going to read this. This next presenter has been a dear friend of mine for a while. I would have to call him one of my best friends. We have spent a lot of time together and have had some deep conversations. He has been by my side through my awakening and spiritual growth, but then Journey to Truth came along. My time with him started to become less and less. I became somewhat frustrated. As Journey to Truth grew, he became more preoccupied with the podcast, the weekly shows, and now the annual conference. I had to sit with this. I realized how selfish it was of me. The information that Tyler and Aaron put out to the world is so critical to raise the awareness and vibration of this amazing planet. So I feel honored to share his time with all of you. You are all here for the same purpose. With that said, it is with great pleasure to introduce not only my best friend, but I'm beyond honored to call him my son, Tyler Kawala. So, there you go. Here's Tyler.
Where's he at? You had to do that. Oh, man. I wish I could say the same about you. No, thank you so much, and I love you. And, you were the reason that this whole thing even started, honestly. It was you that discovered a local MUFON meetup that kind of put us both on our path, but it was a snowball of synchronicities that led me here, and he was by my side every step of the way, and, I was going to go to my first conference alone, and I asked him, I said, would you want to go with me? And he said, sure. I said, I think it might be a life-changing experience. I just had that feeling, and it was in so many ways, so thank you. Okay, now let's shift the energy just a little bit. So, remember I told you guys you were going to get to know Barry? Stand up, Barry, one more time. So the next photos you see might feel inappropriate, but they're not. So every time I'm hanging around Barry, he just is. I just happen to notice he always looks like he's striking a pose, And I was like, man, that would make a perfect meme. So I'd be like, Barry, don't move. And I would just take a picture, and then the meme would hit me. So during COVID, we were in Cocoa Beach for a conference, and we're on the beach in between presenters or whatever, and Barry's laying there on the beach. I'm like, man, that's a perfect meme. So I take a picture, because against all odds, we were in Cocoa Beach, by the way. They didn't want anyone traveling. It was really hard. I mean, we put this conference on, and it was amazing that we even pulled it off and got people together, because we were hitting roadblock after roadblock, but we still did it. And so the perfect phrase for the meme would be, what virus? He was not posing for a photo. That's how he was hanging out. So in 2022 in Orlando, we were at another conference hanging out by the pool. And Barry was striking another pose unbeknownst to him. And I took a picture. And this next one might seem a little inappropriate, and I apologize if it triggers anybody, but Barry, are you still single? Starting bid, $5. A night with Barry. And if you know Barry, he's always clumsy. We were live at East Eddy Ranch, and Barry came to say something funny while we were hosting the podcast, and he tripped and busted his ass on live camera broadcast. Check real quick to make sure Barry was even live. Hey, there's no audio on this video. Supposed to be audio. Barry, that was better. That was even better. And we're gonna see it again in slow motion. Yeah. Yeah. All right, figured I'd get a little, liven up the crowd just a little bit before we get started. So as you know, let me open this water. As you know, I'm clumsy also. Secret Space Program was one of the things that kind of blasted me wide open. You know, I watched all the UFO programs on TV, and they leave you hanging, and they tell you all this stuff, and at the end they debunk themselves, like, oh, you know, but this, and could it be? And it's just, you know, it's all bullshit. So when I learned about the Secret Space Program, it was filling in all these blanks. It made so much sense to me. And, you know, it takes years and years to really start to comprehend the possibility that this can even exist. But then it was, you know, we're going to get into the potential possibility of the Secret Space Program as we know it existing in another dimension. And this concept came to me over time, and it was because of, well, this is just, you know, we can all pretty much agree at this point that there's something going on, right? But let's take the conversation to the next level. And Kerry Cassidy had a whistleblower that she would, I even still tried to get the name from her recently, and she would not give this guy's name up. He's never done an interview, but he's just shared information with her. And he said that the Mars that the people are remembering from the Secret Space Program exists in another dimension, and the jump room that he's aware of was in Texas. And Kerry wouldn't share any more information with me, you know, because she likes to hold on to that, I guess. But it's okay. But it got me, that was years ago when I heard that, and it got me thinking, and I didn't even know if I fully believed it yet until I had my own experience where I had a dream where I thought it was a dream, right? Where I was taken to these two buildings in Illinois. And I knew they were in Illinois. I don't know how I knew that. And I remember vividly, like the buildings. I woke up and drew this. I kind of touched it up a little bit just so you guys can see it because it was just a scribbly pencil drawing. I was, in the experience, I was brought to these facilities in 2 black SUVs and brought around back of this building and taken down below for some testing. They were testing my abilities. And I woke up and it was so real, and I was like, there's no way that wasn't real. Like it was, you can't distinguish sometimes between your dream world and the waking world, right? And it just stuck with me and it impacted me. I had to draw this picture. I couldn't get it out of my mind. There's a long story that goes along with it. And it was through somebody I met at our first conference who was a delivery driver, and he was delivering to a Boeing facility. And he told me the story about an experience he had when he was delivering there. And as soon as he said Boeing, I was like, that's it. Those are Boeing buildings. I remember it now. So I got on Google Earth, and I just started, or Google Maps, whatever, and started looking for Boeing facilities in Illinois. And I found them. So when I pulled into the parking lot, it was so emotional. It was the moment, we've interviewed people, and we've talked about this and had conversations for years at this point. But it was the moment I realized, oh, it's real. Like this was real, and it just hit me on a different level than it had ever hit me before. But I'm like, wait a second. There was a road between those buildings, and there's not a road between those buildings, but they're the same buildings, and I can tell you by my memory. And I started thinking about some of the other details. I'm like, there were subtle differences. I'm like, this is the concept of parallel realities and other dimensions. I'm like, is this stuff that we're remembering actually happening on this timeline? And it was because of this I really started thinking a lot harder about it. And once you put yourself on a path that, we like to research, and the universe just kind of hands you what you need, and that's what this presentation is going to be about. So it was this personal experience that, and that's just it from above. It's actually an airport. And what's interesting about this also was next door to that, you can't see it, in the memory, I saw my old construction company was building a facility next to these buildings. And I don't know why I remember seeing that when I was brought into these buildings. When I went there in person, when I drove there, I was looking at the buildings. I forgot all about the construction thing. And I saw a truck pulling a dumpster down the road, and it had my old company's name on it, Peric Construction. And I'm like, where's that truck going? And I look over, and it's a job site for my old company, exactly like I remembered. I'm like, okay, now I know it's real, but the job didn't look exactly like I remembered seeing it in the memory either. But it was there. So we're talking about a potential parallel timeline, an alternate reality. I don't actually know, but this is what kind of sent me down that rabbit hole. And it's an airport as well. Okay, so you guys might know Katie. She was here last year doing some channeling. She wrote 2 amazing books, channeled information from a group she calls the Chorus. So I pulled some information from her books really quickly about reality itself. Reality is quite simply how you perceive energetic frequencies. Currently, consciously, in your perception of energy is by way of the 5 senses. This is what you define as real and reality. And I think we could all agree with that. It was such a beautiful explanation, I had to use it. And this is probably a very limited perspective about a parallel timeline, but or another version of you. We remember Dolores Cannon. She would always say, for every choice you make, there's another version of you that made the other choice, and you live out that life and that reality until it eventually phases out. And there could be infinite versions of you playing out infinite realities at the same time. And I mean, that's just kind of a very rudimentary depiction of that. But I had never seen it portrayed more beautifully than this show, Devs. Has anybody seen this show? Ben, where's Ben at? So my new roommate, Ben, and we've had him on the show before, he's like, you got to watch this show. And it was about essentially a private corporation existing outside the government who had an infinite amount of money, developing looking glass technology in an underground facility, and they depict, through this looking glass technology, they were able to realize exactly what Dolores Cannon was explaining. But they could now visualize, they had the visual, you could say video, of every person living out every single timeline. They could watch the person make this decision and not make that decision, and they could follow him and see what happens. And then they depicted it in a number of scenes, how that person would start in one location but branch out in like 8 or 10 different ways, and it would show what it would look like when that actually happens. It was the first time I had ever seen it actually displayed, and I was like, that's it. That's what Dolores Cannon was talking about. And this show is disclosure. It's absolutely incredible. What is it? Hulu. Only one season, and it came out in 2020. Yeah, one season, and it's good stuff. And it shows the level of corruption whenever you try and expose one of these groups, and in a very scary, real way. Okay, so what is a dimension? Again, thanks to Katie and the chorus. A dimension, by current perspective, is a place different than the time and place in which you currently exist, mentally and physically. We consider a dimension to be an experience of a composite of wavelengths. In other words, a consensus reality existing within a specific range of frequencies. It's been also explained, you could zoom out a little bit, it's been explained that dimensions actually don't exist. They only exist because our limiting beliefs. We put those barriers there because of our limiting beliefs, but there are no barriers between these frequencies, right? They're only put there by our belief system, which is just something interesting to think about. And everyone has different opinions and theories on what a dimension is and densities. But why did I put this slide in here? How does this all work, I think? Okay, so that's what it was. Okay, so if this is true, how are they pulling this off? What type of group, what type of militaries have access to this knowledge and this technology to pick somebody out of this timeline and put them on a mission on another timeline? How is that even possible? And we have to, what I realize is the Sands of Times books that I've been referencing, Aaron's been referencing lately, are probably some of the most important books I've ever read. And I've said it before, I can't believe I even had an intelligent conversation about disclosure without reading those books, because it literally changes everything. And it fills in so many blanks, and all the stuff that we're guessing about. It provides some very, very valuable insights on what potentially could be going on, and the technology that our shadow government has been working with for a long, long time. And some of the information in that book is they talk about this. It's a black site, a U.S. Navy black site located inside the Melton J. Anderson Flight and Test Center in Nevada, located in a small set of hills in the south end of Groom Lake, Dry Lake. They call it a black site. You have to have Q clearance to get into, which is a real clearance. And they also in the book describe it as the Naval Space Fleet Command Center, where the original U.S. Navy secret space program was operating out of. But in the middle of this facility is this guy. And it's an ancient Mayan ruler. And when the man who passed this information along to Sean David Morton have published in his diaries, he talked about asking the XO why the statue was in the facility. He said, this is the first known recorded time traveler in Earth history. The Mayans were time traveling. This is not anything new. This is nothing new at all. And I would imagine that these secret societies who have this occult knowledge understand this. And as Mason explained so beautifully, like these fraternities, they understand this stuff. And a lot of what we see, it all stems from this occult knowledge. And this is just a little bit about that site. So no one outside this base in China Lake even knew this assignment existed until they got it. Even the Navy had little to no control over this base. It was a black site, all on their organizational charts. the commandment at Nellis Air Force Base, which this place was officially part of, or even the President of the United States didn't have clearance to be there. It was truly a don't ask, don't tell facility in a different sense of the word. The advanced research that came out of this location was given to the Navy for implementation aboard the fleet and in the air. And by air, that meant above the earth and out into the universe. It was a research facility that just kept giving and no one had to provide oversight. All the upper levels, management straight through to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, were not really sure how this site was budgeted or paid for. No one had the privilege of knowing, and that meant no one, not even Congress, had any idea of what went on there, and even top-level cleared committees only knew the name, and that it turned out some powerful systems. There were no congressional visits or photo ops here. So just to give you an idea of kind of how these black sites operate outside of the government that even a president didn't know about. Okay, so we have to go back in time a little bit. So the Philadelphia experiment, I'm sure most of you guys have heard about that. It was an attempt to create a ship that could not be detected by radar or magnetic sea mines, but some theorists believe that it was a project that was supposed to make naval ships invisible and teleport them. It was meant to be used in World War II to allow naval vessels to change their locations while at war at lightning speed without any direction. The movie The Final Countdown, that was made in 1980, depicts this exactly. The Navy, in the movie, they accidentally discovered the portal, and they go back to try to stop World War II via this portal and time travel technology. But as John Warner IV says, that was a Navy recruitment film, and he was there for the premiere, and Navy brass was there present for the premiere to approve of it as their recruitment film. So Tesla was behind this. And the interesting thing about Tesla, in the Sands of Times book, actually it was Albert Einstein and Tesla working together. And the Philadelphia experiment, this was kind of their baby. And they did the first couple tests without humans, and certain aspects, factions of the Navy, thought that it was a success. But Tesla and Einstein were like, no, this is not safe for humans. We have to do further testing. But they were adamant on doing it with humans. And according to Sands of Time, Tesla and Einstein backed out of this completely, and they did not agree with it. And then the military went on to test it without them, and that's what happened with the Philadelphia experiment. Whenever they were, stuck in the ship, all these men died. So that was kind of the story behind that. And I'm bringing this up for a reason. So what they realized after this and after the Nazi Bell experiment, which we'll get into, is that they were tearing holes in space-time, dimensional tears at where UFOs were coming in from other dimensions. And that's where the UFO flap in the 40s and 50s came from, and even before that. But they were actually tearing holes in our dimension. And they described HAARP, the facility HAARP that we're all well aware of. In this book, it describes HAARP was actually intentional. Its original intent was to create a frequency net around our planet that would, they were trying to seal up these holes. And the byproduct of HAARP was weather manipulation, an accidental byproduct. And that's probably what it's used for today. But according to this information, they were trying to seal up these holes that they were creating whenever they were testing their theories, right? And they created a lot of holes. And we're going to get into that. But so back to Tesla. As mentioned in the last article, inexplicable things had taken place wherever Dr. Nikola Tesla was involved, but in many of those things, Dr. Tesla practiced watertight secrecy and even avoided taking any patent. It is believed that using electricity, Dr. Tesla had made the startling discovery of the way to bend the space-time. This discovery leads to another baffling discovery, that of teleportation. And, we've heard of the Tesla teleporter from Andrew Basiago, Al Bielek, and many other people, Project Pegasus, Philadelphia Experiment, which was really called Project Rainbow. But I found this when I was researching. I found this video game called Second Life. It's like Sims. You guys have all heard of Sims. Well, it's a video game where you literally create a second life for yourself. And it's an entire planet where you can live a fake life through an avatar. And one of the things you can purchase that's available in this world is a Tesla teleporter system. And they like to tell us the truth in these games. The futuristic teleport system works on a landmark, a great new age technology for your enjoyment. Sim technology to help you out to reach the great heights and get around the land with a modern age, space age technology. So I just found it very interesting. Okay, so in 1945, they were testing the Die Glock, which means clock, the clock in Germany at the end of World War II, the very end of World War II, and in a secret facility that even our government didn't know about because that's one area that was not bombed. It was very well hidden. And there was some power-hungry, egoic, greedy bastards running the show. They wanted to hold on to this technology for their own purposes. And through testing and a lot of lost lives, they realized that this thing actually worked. And when it started working, they didn't know what it was doing, and it was chained down to this thing. It was chained down, and it started taking off because they didn't want to lose this thing, right? Well, it was starting to break the chains, and they had literally a prison cell of slaves, essentially, just sitting there waiting to be used as test subjects when this technology turned on. So they sent these people in to go tie these chains back down because they didn't want to lose this thing. They just pulled them out of the cell and sent them in to tie these chains down. And what happened when they went into that field, they literally froze and blew away like dust. And that's what the sands of time comes from. They realize when you step into that time wave, we've seen that in the movies, right? Where people just like wisp away. That's a real thing, apparently, according to this information. So this thing broke the chains, it took off, went into the upper atmosphere, and disappeared. Where did it go? 20 years later, it ended up in 1965 in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. It time traveled 20 years into the future. And, the government, the shadow government, knew exactly what it was and when it showed up. But the markings that were described by witnesses match exactly what the markings were on the Nazi bell. So that's another connection. So they were accidentally discovering time travel at this point. Okay, before we get into that. No one was in it, no. But they realized that this thing was a time travel device. And, there's the whole Vril Diamond and Maria Orsic and the channeling and stuff. That's a whole other part of the story. But this was actually, I think Philadelphia experiment was first. But this also created a big tear in the space-time. And it was another hole that they had to try and seal up. And it was a major, major issue for our shadow government. And the way it was explained was, it wasn't necessarily to keep it a secret from the public because they didn't want us to know that this technology existed. They didn't want us to know that they were literally fucking shit up. Like, they had no idea what they were doing. So, why would you want to give us that technology and tell us about that technology when they don't even understand it? Because they're scared of what they don't understand. And by the way, in the Sean David Morton books, he gives the equations for time travel. And there's pages in those books that are like a foreign language to me. And according to Kerry Cassidy and anybody who's read the books, that's why he was wrongfully imprisoned for 4 years, and he was given throat cancer, and now he can't talk, and he's, on a feeding tube. But he said at the end of those books, I was like, people were like, well, why are they allowing him to just put this information out into the public's eye? Well, this information is so next level. They said that there's maybe 5 people on the planet, 5 people that could even comprehend these equations, to actually do something with it, to build a device to traverse time, which isn't even what we think it is anyway. This is an excerpt I'm going to play from an Area 51 whistleblower in 2008 about dimensions, and what he says is very interesting, and I hope you guys can hear this.
As I've said, and let me make this clear, the presence of alien beings and the technology does exist. It is real as you or me, and it's a whole lot more out there than even the most diehard believers could possibly fathom. The truth is that we, and by we I mean this planet and the people of this planet, are in essence blind to what is really going on in the cosmos and interstellar space. What people call aliens, we call IBs, or in layman's terms, interdimensional beings. And what we've found out and have known about since the early 70s is that, in simplest terms, other dimensions or planes, as we call them, exist and lay on top of each other, almost stacked, as if you had a blanket with another blanket stacked on top of it and another blanket stacked on top of it. To explain it so you can understand, you can imagine the Earth and our reality as a thin blanket, and all of these other higher dimensions are the blankets laying directly on top of ours. However, we can only see our own blanket. Now, the alien beings, or the ships that we have seen in videos, and that many people have captured over the years, are in fact what we call jumpers, in that they exist in their relative dimensions, but have in fact jumped into ours. We have discovered that most of the time we are unable to see them, as they are at a wavelength indifferent to our own, and our senses, eyes and ears cannot detect. From the information that I have gathered and been briefed on, every planet, star, and galaxy within our own plane and universe, as we see it, exists also in these other dimensions. We've detected that we know of and that I've been briefed on at least 4 other dimensions that do exist. Now, as I said, every planet we know of, every galaxy does exist in these other dimensions. However, with each new dimension, each planet, galaxy, star takes on a different form. To explain it in the most simplest terms, you can look at our own planet, Jupiter, which is in the outer reaches of our solar system. Now, to us, it's a deadly gaseous planet, completely uninhabitable. However, when you look at Jupiter in an elevated dimension, you will see that it is completely changed in all forms. You will see that it's no longer a deadly ball of gas, but is now solid, has a different color, and is now inhabited. We know for a fact this is true due to the fact that the government has the technology to detect these higher dimensions and actually get a small view of what the solar system looks like on the other side, as we call it, in these other dimensions. There is much we do not know about the universe and how it works. However, here are the facts that I can confirm as truth and were made known to me, and that I and the other people that I worked with have been briefed on. Now, we are not alone in the universe. There are alien beings within our own dimension of space, as well as other dimensions. The planet Earth is an early stage, I guess you could say, training ground, if you will, whereby which we as beings will live until we advance to the higher dimensions. Now, we are not the bottom of the food chain, and we have discovered that there are at least 2 dimensions below our own plane. But that is as far as I will go regarding that.
So, I just figured instead of trying to relay all that information to you, let's hear it from somebody who potentially, if he's being truthful with us, is telling us that our government is well aware of these other dimensions. And, the lower dimensions, like I guess you could say, would be 2D and 1D. And in my opinion, after talking to Daryl James, he was told about the flat Earth being a psyop created by Michael Aquino in 1980. That's what your executive officer told you. Well, I'm like, if that's true, he just said the Earth takes on different forms and different dimensions. Well, what's the best way to counter ascension? To get everybody to devolve into a lower dimension where the planet is flat. So you're countering the ascension by tricking people into thinking that we exist on this flat planet, right? In this two-dimensional world. Just like a video game, you can imagine a 2D video game as that technology evolves, that 2D plane becomes a round sphere. And you can imagine when they're developing those video games, there was probably a lot of creative frustration because they were completely limited to what they can achieve through that 2D technology. That's the same with us. If we're living in that 2D consciousness, that lower dimension, our creative abilities, like Mason said, they're gone. They're gone. So they're constantly trying to keep us in those lower frequencies so we don't ascend, in my opinion. Okay, so and in the Sands of Times books, they never once talk about a flat Earth either. They talk about very much a round sphere in all the test flights that they would do, going in and out of our atmosphere and a lot of the holes that they were tearing. But the speed of light is no longer an issue. So in Sands of Times, they talk about the TR-3B, what they call the Viper in the programs. And they said if you ever see one up close, it actually has like a Viper's head painted on it. But this was the first craft that we reverse engineered that could actually pop through the bubble, as they say, pop through our atmosphere. And they described as the hull of the ship being almost exactly the same material as a whale blubber, or whale skin blubber, that it would allow us to penetrate our atmosphere and not burn up, right? We never went via rockets. And actually, if you were to keep listening to that Area 51 whistleblower, he says the same thing. When they went to the moon, they weren't using rockets. That was a dog and pony show, but they did go according to a number of people. So this technology is operable patent that we can all go online and find right now, and inertial mass reduction device. So what it is basically when an object approaches the speed of light, it increases in mass. Therefore, it can never reach the speed of light because it gets heavier. Well, this is a mass reduction device. It decreases the mass of the object as it increases in speed, and allowing it to achieve speed of light travel. And this is an operable patent, and it is depicted on a triangle craft, which is what we know as the TR-3B, which there's also a patent for, by the way, on Google. This stuff is out there. The U.S. Navy mass reduction device is the same technology used for biological time travel. The plasma bubble creates a field where it would appear that there is no mass inside of it. Therefore, it can travel much faster than the speed of light without violating Einstein's rules for relativity. Within the field, they are existing in zero time. Google information. You can find that on Google. What about the firmament? This is the big argument, right? I don't know. What about the firmament? I have no idea. I really don't know. It's a mystery, but according to many people, there's ways through it. I mean, and of course, they would want us to believe that there's not, because that's a very limited way to look at things. And thanks to my friend Nikki, who shared a book with me, The Lost City of Manoa, I believe it's called. In the end of that book, this guy is taken to Atlantis and through this Atlantean portal in Colombia, and he's given information about the history of our planet, and including our atmosphere and the solar system, the universe. And they said that the firmament is Mother Earth's aura, and it's the reason we can't pass through it is because we're not frequency matched. We're trying to go through it with rockets. It doesn't work. But the higher dimensional beings who are frequency matched to the aura, they can pass through. It's not even an issue. But we're down here using this technology thinking that we have to build these devices as a middleman to get there when we don't. We can just use our own bodies, honestly. So this gets us into, this is a real photo, by the way, yeah. This gets us into soft spots and jump rooms. So if you've heard any secret space program testimonies, they talk about jump rooms. Max Spears talked about one under LAX Airport, Sepulveda Boulevard, where they take you to Mars. You just step into an elevator and you're on Mars. Andrew Basiago talks about it. Michael Relf talks about it. I mean, a number of people talk about these jump rooms, and they're everywhere. Well, how are these jump rooms created? Well, there's two ways. First of all, we have to understand that our world has soft spots, places where the fundamental constants of nature, gravity, speed of light, the mass of a proton have begun to decay. In these particular areas, the membrane between realities is thinner, almost porous. The Bermuda Triangle is a perfect example of this. But as a result of humans tinkering with the laws of physics and the technology they have created, so many soft spots that our realities are now merging. Have you ever seen two suns? The government's lying to us. There's two suns. Maybe they didn't even know. The realities are merging right now, and we're seeing things that don't make any sense. It doesn't mean that the earth is flat. It doesn't mean that it's round. It doesn't mean that they've been lying to us this whole time. It means that something is happening right now that none of us can explain, but I think a number of us have had experiences where we can agree that it would appear that realities are merging. And maybe that's a result of us ascending, reaching a higher frequency, and we're starting to get glimpses of that frequencies on certain days when the time is right. If you're in the right spot, you can see two suns. I mean, who knows? Are these soft spots being utilized as jump rooms? Yes. So the ring teleporter, a.k.a. the Beast, this was the very first teleporter in Area 51 that they were experimenting with, and they were sending objects to and from the moon decades in advance of the Apollo missions. And the very first object that the first biological object that they sent was, we'll get back to that, was a chimp. Actually, Dian Fossey, the chimp that she worked with was actually owned by the government. And when it came time to send something through, they decided we're going to send this. And he made it to the moon, and he made it to the Malabar Transmitter Annex, which is a base on the backside of our moon, according to the Sands of Times. And they have a sister location in Florida, actually, which I'll get back into that slide. But when he got there, he was moving in slow motion. They thought it was a successful jump, but he was moving in slow motion, like just completely slow motion. So they sent him back, and when he came back, the caretaker after Diana Fossey, she was in the room, and they were using this chimp against her will. She had no say in the matter because this was like her child. She did not want this to happen, but it did. When he came back, he was still moving in slow motion. She panicked. She jumped into the time wave with him, and they both whisked away in the sands of time. That was their first unsuccessful, yet somewhat successful experiment. But the Malabar Transmitter Annex, the Earth location, is currently used as an auxiliary communications annex in support of space activities for NASA and the U.S. Space Force. The facility is under control of the 45th Space Wing. Security is administered by Patrick Space Force Base, originally established as Malabar Naval Outer Landing Field, as blah, 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 whatever. So, but this is the moon version. So Cape Malabar Radio, so the Florida West Coast and the moon. Monitoring station, it's a monitoring station that could process millions of Earth-based radio signals a second and monitored every conceivable frequency that could carry any form of information all the way from radio long wave onto one end of the X-ray and gamma rays at the other end. All laser-based signals used by the Nebraska Navy, which was one of the nicknames for the U.S. Space Command's extraterrestrial Starfleet. If it was in the electromagnetic spectrum anywhere in the solar system and far beyond and carried a signal, then Cape Malabar Radio heard it. They had 26 technicians that worked there, and they rotated 6 months on, 6 months off. In the book, they described that some of the people hated working there because you're trapped on the moon for 6 months, and It's very boring. Some people are made for it. The pay was well beyond any what you could comprehend. And while using this device, one of the things that the scientists discovered, who admittedly in the book did not believe that we had chakras, when you would step into those rings, the chakras would light up. And I added this slide during Mason's presentation because it reminded me of this. They were, for the first time ever, able to visually see our chakras, because what it does when you step into that field, your field expands, and you almost expand into your light body, and all the chakras would light up, and they had their first evidence that the chakras were real, the chakra system was real. Although I'm sure there were people that knew it was real, but, scientists, they need to see the evidence. Okay, so we've all heard about the 20 and back tech. Well, how does that work? Well, thanks to the Sands of Time, Book 4, they tell us. So this is explaining the technology. If it's set on automatic, the unit will allow a person to walk around, look at things, meet other beings, etc., like what Ted called dancing between the raindrops effect, and then flash back to the main facility, and those there will not have noticed that any time passed at all, yet the person may have been away for weeks, months, and sometimes even years, depending on, of course, where they teleported to in the galaxy. Once the return trip starts, the field effect examines the biological entity and resets the original biological pattern, which is stored into the unit, so that there will be no visible change in the person. However, it will not affect the memory at all, at least not the memory of the person at the eye of the storm. That's why they had to memory wipe us, because when they bring people back from these programs, it doesn't actually, you retain those memories, and they can't allow that. So they've developed that technology, and I'm sure you guys all understand that does exist. And then this is just Mars, Michael Relf, and the reason I put him in here because this was published, his book was published in 2000, in the year 2000, and he was the original Mars whistleblower, published in 2000, detailed records of over 250 hours of clearing sessions with a biofeedback meter where a man who had been in the U.S. Navy regained hidden memories of military service on Mars, time travel, killing with remote viewing, mind control, and military and alien abductions. Relf was to serve with the Mars Defense Force and traveled through what he described as a teleportation device called a jump gate to Mars and begun his service. That was from Dr. Michael Sala's book. Underneath the Great Lakes base, there is an entire underground area, the tunnel, what they call the tunnel. The base I'm to be assigned to is the Mars base. The way to get there is through the jump gate. It's like a tunnel through hyperspace. Michael Relf. That was in 2000. He was talking about this stuff. And he also does mention the 20 and back in his testimony. So a dimensional shift. A dimensional shift was a phenomenon whereby an object or person transported from one location to another via folded space-time transport or shifted to a parallel universe on a different dimensional plane. That's what happens when you look up a dimensional shift on Google. It's like they're telling you. It's right there. And it's described in The Hollow Earth. I forgot what book it was reading. Like, how are these craft not detected when they're, leaving our planet? And it explains that these craft would actually... do I have that slide? Yeah. The Smoky God. So from this book, Transportation... Moving sidewalks, inner-level elevators, and electromagnetic sleds resembling our snowmobiles within the city. For travel between cities, residents take the tube, an electromagnetic subway system capable of up to 3,000 mile per hour speeds. Yes, the Agarthians are well-versed in intergalactic etiquette and are members of the Confederation of Planets. Space travel has been perfected and has the ability for interdimensional shifts that render these ships undetectable. Interdimensional... Well, they called it dimensional shift on Google, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Our government, our shadow governments understand all of this. And we're still flying on freaking conventional aircraft. This is Max Spears briefly explaining some very interesting information about his experience with the Mars jump room.
And then there was a screen to the right of me, and it said on the screen, 1 minute to Mars, 50 seconds to Mars, 40 seconds to Mars, 30 seconds to Mars, 20 seconds to Mars, 10 seconds to Mars, and then flash, bright flash like that, and then I'm back in the same place again. So 2 different ways. It's interesting because and this was in 2008, okay? Not too long after that, a band, a musical band came out that is called 30 Seconds to Mars. And I remember distinctly seeing on this thing, doing the countdown, and it said 30 Seconds to Mars on it. But what they did then, at the end of the Mars, at the end of that thing, is they used age regression technology, brought us back to 5 years old, and then placed us exactly back to where we were. Now, when I was 5 years old, my parents moved to Los Angeles at the time, out of the blue, and I was living on Sepulveda Boulevard, and the Mars jump rooms for children were on at 999 Sepulveda Boulevard. I now know. So and I didn't know. So I had these memories before I knew that this particular information about these Mars jump rooms on Sepulveda Boulevard. Sepulveda Boulevard is in the San Fernando Valley area of Los Angeles, the suburb of Los Angeles.
And I was just there, actually. Brad Olson, did you go and check out the Sepulveda Boulevard? Yeah. Right. 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 But yeah, we were just at a conference there, and the conference was like a block away from this place. So I think James Rink was there, and him and somebody else went to go try and explore, and they went into the building, and the upper floors were closed off and owned by the government, apparently, so they couldn't get up there. So that's where it shows on Google Maps, but that's not actually the location. Okay, so this movie Tomorrowland, I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about this. How am I doing for time? Okay. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about this movie. So it is essentially about secret societies developing out an advanced civilization in a parallel timeline, in another dimension, a plus ultra secret society. And the jump room for that dimension in the movie is at the World's Fairs. And we talk about the Tartaria stuff in the World's Fairs, and Tartaria possibly existed in another dimension. Well, in this other dimension in this movie, who, by the way, the secret society is Gustav Eiffel, Jules Verne, Nikola Tesla, and Thomas Edison. They founded a plus ultra, a secret society of futurists creating Tomorrowland in another dimension, free to make scientific breakthroughs without obstruction. And there's tons of disclosure in this movie. And let's just pretend that's true. That's exactly what our militaries and governments would be doing, private corporations would be doing, to build out these breakaway civilizations in other dimensions. So whenever you're taken into the programs, maybe you're not going somewhere else in this dimension. Maybe you're going to another dimension, just like this movie tells you. And what's interesting, this is the jump room in the movie. And when I saw this, the first thing I saw was SSP. He goes into the jump room and you see SSP. So I'm like, okay, maybe they're telling you. That's how they're doing this, right in front of your eyes. And then this is just, I'm not going to read this, but should I read it? Yeah. So the Tomorrowland 56 expansion at Disneyland was actually about training future society members for the journey to an alternate universe that had been found or developed by Plus Ultra. The blueprints for the expansion held key technologies that enabled the journey, including supra transport. Key VIPs who were encouraged to join Plus Ultra were given a special VIP audio tour of World's Fair's attractions such as Forge Magic Skyway, It's a Small World. For those that couldn't attend the fair, there was a double grooved LP that was given. Anyway, yeah, so in a small world, It's a Small World at the 1964 World's Fair contained a portal to Tomorrowland. So this is essentially what the movie plot is based on, but if you start going down this rabbit hole, you start to lose track of what information is real and what's about the movie. It's like, I don't know, like the movie plot can't be that extensive. I feel like they're just telling us the truth of the matter. Okay, that was just an elevator. I imagine maybe that's what a jump room looks like. You get onto the elevator and, well, some people explain actually that the show Fringe, who's seen that Fringe, where there's a parallel Earth and they're going back and forth between dimensions, when I think Olivia, the main character, finally goes to the other dimension for the first time. She gets on an elevator and gets off the elevator, and she's in parallel Earth. And it happens to be just in the middle of one of the buildings downtown. Like, it wasn't anywhere special, and they're hiding in the same places in our reality. Arkeem Ra, who's not here, he explained it beautifully. Whenever people are taken into the programs, he said it's called a bubble swap. This was him and I, a conversation we were having. He said it's called a bubble swap. These programs exist in time bubbles. They swap assets all the time with other realities, so that when you get your memories back, you aren't even talking about the reality that you are in, and there is no security breach. It's real as all hell. But it's a perfect way. If you get your memories back, and they're from another dimension, and you start telling everybody, and there's no proof of that in this reality, then you do look crazy, and they just throw you in an insane asylum. Communicating with other dimensions. This is something Andrew Basiago talks about, and I'm going to play this clip of him talking about that before we run out of time.
We would then have to jump back through a conference room that had a teleporter in it at that building in 2045. But yet we couldn't see it, so we had to learn to literally run hard against a solid wall inside a building to get home. And we would go through a portal tunnel again for 30 seconds, and we would pop into view at the Lobo Overlook site up Microwave Tower Road in southwest Colorado, immediately west of the Continental Divide sign, so north of Pagosa Springs. And when we did, we knew we were back in 1972. So that means that huge micro tower array there, which we call Montauk Southwest, so that means they were using emissions of microwave into the known universe to literally pinpoint this location. So when we put that together with the fact that my dad and his colleagues were able to get me back from that dimension that I had been accidentally teleported to, it means that, I mean, we can only extrapolate and conclude that Project Pegasus had the ability literally to communicate between dimensions. So the relevance of that to understanding the function today of the deep state, which the deep state has had communication between dimensions for 50 years, and that has to matter.
So I found the Lobo Overlook that he was talking about in Colorado, and there's a picture of it, and he said this is the tower that they would use to communicate through dimensions. Whenever he jumped back to the wrong timeline, he went home and there was a different family living in his home. This was the tower they used to communicate to his timeline to get him back to the right timeline. And guess who built that tower? Tesla constructed that tower in 1899. Tesla constructed a scalar light tower in Colorado Springs in 1899. This free energy tower served as a wireless transmission of free energy from the sun as well as the stars. Notably, no wires are seen in this photograph, as the universe provides the infrastructure for the transmission of free energy. Tesla built that. This is a modern version of it, I'm sure, and I would imagine that leads to an underground facility, no doubt. So Neera Isley, who is, I don't know if she's in the room right now, but so how do they get us into these higher dimensions? How can our physical body handle it? Well, in her testimony, she described getting this shot that she described as possibly what it felt like as simulating ascension. And she still doesn't actually understand what it meant. But when she said that, and I'm thinking about, getting to these higher dimensions, it reminded me of Daryl James' testimony, which I'm not going to play the clip for time, but he talks about when he was brought into the programs, he was put into a density chamber that looks like a gas chamber, and it pushes you from the third to the fifth density, right? Dimension. It's because all of the extraterrestrial beings and the space fleets that you interact with in the programs exist in fifth dimension, fifth density, I guess you should say. And they push you up. They push you up so you can exist in a higher dimension, which means that we're technically operating in another dimension. And my theory would probably be correct. But when you said that, it reminded me in the RS testimony. I'm like, well, maybe with Daryl, they were doing it in a gas chamber, but maybe they were experimenting with a drug that could do it also without the need for that gas chamber or that density chamber. We just have to, start connecting these dots on our own, start thinking outside the box. I don't know if I'm right about any of this or any of this, but this is a density, or kind of what the density chamber looked like. It's not accurate, Daryl, right? It's close, though. Right. Right. So, but why would they need to do that if you're not traveling dimensions? I mean, I'm sure, like what they learned with the early Sands of Time experiments, the Sands of Time is real, and if they were to just send you straight there, your physical body couldn't handle it.
And I said, well, the XO himself came up.
Okay, so this next part, we have 15 minutes left. Okay, so timeline wars. And okay, this is where it gets crazy. We can't when we see everything happening on the world stage, none of it makes sense to us. None of it makes sense to us. By the way, this is an actual board game, Time War. A game of time travel and conflict. So I believe that this is a true temporal war that we see happening, and a lot of things we see playing out on the surface doesn't make any sense to us, and we're trying to wrap our heads around it and have all these conversations, but this is so far beyond what we can comprehend sometimes. We don't understand the level and the magnitude that they've been doing this, and there's so many groups jumping through these jump rooms and portals and creating, which in the Sands of Time calls the Mandela effects, right? The Mandela effects are created from all of these time travel, all these jumps. Every time you make a jump, you literally can change something, even so insignificant on the timeline, and there's no way to know. There's no way to know what changed unless they describe it. The only way to stop the wave of time would be to create an equal and opposite wave of consciousness going the other way. I'll just read this and I'll finish my point. If you killed Hitler, someone else or someone worse would just take his place to service the consciousness that needed focus for its rage and ideas. You can't make a pyramid disappear by taking off the capstone. Yes, they tried. But take 1 million people back in time who knew the future and what Hitler would become, and you can change time by changing that consciousness. So you can't just go back in time and kill Hitler, because the collective consciousness has already energetically created Hitler. And we all believe in that, so he exists. So somebody else would just fill that void, because the collective belief system hasn't changed. The only way to change that would be to send 1 million people back in time that knew the future, and that collective consciousness could then alter the timeline. They could just as easily boo Hitler and hit him with cabbage and rotten tomatoes than elevate him to the status of a god. Or find the exact point in the ocean where the waves started, where the fish jumped, or where the albatross dove, or where the wind kicked up, or stopped the solar wind, the CME that created the thing in the first place. Small things, unnoticed, for the most part, would be what were leftovers of a timeline change, like seeing someone as president who in your timeline isn't even a dark horse, but didn't even make it out of the gate. This was a whole new bend for Ted, and now he needed to start taking inventory of those things that were different and see if he could pin down the time signature as to when someone had gone back up the time stream and what they had done to alter his immediate world. There were not that many people that understood this all and actually did the time jumps. The risks were so great that most civilizations had forbidden it and even went as far as to destroy all devices that could allow someone to bend time this way. So we were using these devices and creating all the Mandela effects Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A. Just subtle variances. And he said there's no way you can know unless you can go back into the point in time where the wave was created, which is nearly impossible. So when private corporations and groups gain access to this technology and they're making the jumps, they're creating a Mandela effect that everything's compartmentalized. These other corporations, these other governments, they don't know who's doing what and when it's being changed, but it's happening. They know that. And this is from the First Sands of Time book. Basically, he says, they take out one of you, they will get both of you. Why would they do that? Because there are two of you now in possession of one of the biggest secrets in the world. Oh, not the part about the alien invasion coming. That is so far out there, nobody would ever believe you. You can scream that from the rooftops if you want. The secret is that you two actually know that a man can travel through time and has done it. That means there is a way to move from one place in time to another point in time and back again, which means you can control the whole game. The guy I worked for wants this power more than anything else in the universe, and he will do anything to get it, including wiping out whole nations if necessary. That's what we're in the middle of right now. These are psychopaths that will do anything. They don't care what happens to us. That's from Sands of Time, Book 4. And this last part, to save me from reading the screen, and I apologize if it's boring, but I think this is absolutely fascinating information. This is channeled information from a being named Zeush through Robert Shapiro on June 4th, 1994, from the book Shining the Light. And they talk about uncreating somebody from a timeline and what that actually means, and the length, the level of the playing field here. And it's absolutely fascinating. I literally read all this and recorded myself reading it so I don't have to read it on stage. What do they see as an important place in the past or future for us to go to? Any place where money can be made. Give me some examples. For example, think about the great gold strikes in California. Suppose that they were to fly back 1,000 years before the gold was found, pick it all up, and bring it back. Have they been doing things like that? They could. They're not doing it now, but they could do it. They're using these flying discs essentially for protection because they have a threat. But since they can travel in time, they can use them for any assassination they might want to do. Have they done that? They could. Let's just say they have not done so with anyone that you would remember. But we wouldn't remember them if they killed or removed someone who could help us. If they did that and created that, we wouldn't know it. Correct. Had they done that? I will say this. The president that followed President Kennedy would have been someone else. Not counting Lyndon Johnson, who was the vice president, there would have been another person in the guise of a Republican who would have been the president. Mr. Johnson would not have been reelected, and we would have had world peace quite a bit sooner. And he was eliminated before he was born? Yes. However, that one act was, as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back, because now the shadow government is the object of scrutiny. These extraterrestrial forces of purification would come, I'm not going to reveal how, they would come, remove someone who might be an assassin, for example, take him someplace else where he would be purified back to day one of his original birth, assuming he had a normal earth life. All of the influences that caused him to turn to this path of evil would be expurgated from him so that he would be essentially a benevolent, beautiful person. He would be then taken to an extraterrestrial society where he would live out the rest of his life. It would be a good life. But with no memory of that. I know, it seems ruthless. What is to happen to his family and so on? If he is still attracted to having his family with him, then his family will go through the same process as he will and be allowed to join him. This thing with the Republican, is there any place where he would be in the newspapers? His whole life was just erased? Uncreated. That's why you don't know about him. Uncreated. When it's in the newspapers and books and things, because those stories wouldn't have been written unless the person was alive. Do you understand? They wouldn't have been written. You're not going to write a story about somebody who doesn't exist. So all of those things that were written never were. It not only uncreates the life, but it uncreates everything that life touched. A reporter writing a story would be touched by that person because he was writing that story. Let's say this is a famous person at the time that Kennedy was assassinated. Everybody in the country would know his name, and I knew his name? Yes. But the stories were written. They were written because he lived, and he was a candidate and a president. Yes. And it was all uncreated. It is that simple. That's why it is so frightening what can be done. How could they take it out of the newspaper and everything else in the newspaper would stay and that part wouldn't? It's not quite so. It's not like there would be a blank spot where the story was. There would have been something else written there and the graphics would have been changed so you would never have seen it there. It's not just a blank space. And this man would have brought world peace to the planet. He was that powerful. He was influential, yes. You could not look in this man's eyes and feel anger or hatred. There was no way that anyone could resist signing a peace treaty that would be absolutely binding if that man had arranged it. So this man was an avatar. This man was a great being, so they did something almost like uncreating Jesus then. Yes, you can't actually kill someone like this, but you can, using certain technologies, deflect that, meaning that his life took place someplace else. But his life, as it would have occurred on earth, was uncreated. You can't kill the soul, but you can deflect it. So he went to a probable reality. That's a good way to look at it. Well, why are they just getting around to doing something about it now if it was done 30 years ago? You don't understand. The actual mission to go back and do this wasn't that long ago. It was 2 or 3 years ago. You're telling me that we had peace then? This planet was totally, yes. And even down to the level of the ordinary citizen, people were happy. On this planet, 2 or 3 years ago, on this planet. It's hard to believe, and I can't convince you. I can only say that's the way I see it. That you are living in a variation of reality that you weren't intended to live in. Wait a minute. I'm struggling to integrate the idea of this uncreated president. It's like this. There are many ripples going on in your timeline now because not only do you have a secret government interfering with your future and past and so on, you also have all of your individual souls interacting with your future selves, to say nothing of the influence of the Creator, the angelics, and so on. So you've essentially got a whole lot of shaking going on. This means that anything I say going out in print or even to an individual can create more of a shake. Have you ever cooked something, a recipe in which you had to add certain ingredients at certain times to make it right? It's like that. If you add the ingredients at the wrong time, things happen and the cake falls. So timing, as everyone knows, is everything. But there is a reality that existed, even as you were speaking to us in 1991, in which there was peace, there was no Lyndon Johnson reelected, and there was no whatever the next war was. Yes, now it's a dotted line, but then it was intended to be your destiny. So I'm not... That's actually a reminder for a story I was going to tell you guys, but I don't have time for that. So anyway... I had to read it like that because that's such a hard thing to comprehend, and I figured let's just, read it straight from the material. I mean, if all this stuff is true, it changes the game. And not that the game has ever been any different, but we're just now coming into understanding of the lengths that these people will go to, the levels of technology they have, the interdimensional travel and communications, age regression, 20 and back technology. Things are not what they seem. As we know, and everybody in this room knows that. But there was a lot of information I was starting to put together I thought would make a good presentation. And, this is what we like to do. So I thought I would put it together and present it for you guys. And that's my presentation. Hello. And welcome to Conference Phone. If you know the name of the conference you'd like to attend, press 1.
Come on.
Using your touch-tone keypad, please enter the first 3 letters of the conference title now. You've selected Secret Space Conference? If that is correct, press 1.
What?
You've selected Full Disclosure Now. If this is correct, press 1. Why don't you just tell me the name of the conference you'd like to attend? Rebels of Disclosure? To find the venue nearest you, please enter your 5-digit zip code now. Why don't you just tell me where you want to attend the conference? Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. Rebels of Disclosure is playing at the Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center in Grafton, Illinois, May 12th through 15th, 2025.
Yeah, now I got you.
If you would like to purchase tickets, please visit journeytotruth.online now.